Hello, welcome to Inside Politics. My name is Anastasia Lavrina. We are here at COP29 and AnewZ continue with exclusive interviews. Joining me now is Osprey Orielle Lake, founder and executive director of the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network WECAN. Well, welcome to our program.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining our discussion. So, how does climate change affect the gender equality?
Well, it's really important to understand that because of gender inequality all over the world, women are being impacted first and worse by the climate crisis. And so when we're talking about gender equality, it's essential that as we're here at COP29, that we really ensure that women's rights and the understanding of the intersection of how women are being impacted is centered in the discussions.
Well, here at COP29, there were some sessions where the gender issues were discussed and the problem-solved solution were trying to be achieved, to be reached by the participants. I know that you had a very nice side events at the COP29. How do you think the countries are willing to bring some changes when it comes to gender inequality in some countries of the world?
Yeah, I think the important factor here is that, one, it's not very well understood. So we need to continue to advocate and to communicate that because of gender inequality, women don't have the same agency in countries around the world, and of course it varies depending on different governments. But one of the untold stories that we really want to share here, which we shared at our side event, is that women are carrying solutions. And this is what's not understood. And I'm just going to give you one stat so that we land this in a very specific way, which is that there's something called the Women's Political Empowerment Index, which shows women's agency, their social structures in different countries. And all over the world, with just a 1-unit increase in the Women's Political Empowerment Index, we see a relationship to an 11.51% decrease in carbon emission reductions. And so it just shows that when women are engaged, we see a betterment for the environment. We see what happens when women are at the highest levels of government, how they have really better environmental policies. And then at the grassroots level, we see, as an example, that 40 to 80% of all household food production in developing countries is done by women. And there's a big relationship between food security and food sovereignty and the climate crisis. And so, without going through a lot of statistics that people can find on our website, I think we really need to understand the central role in terms of women and their movement building, women on the ground and reforestation projects, and how much they're also leading their countries to the best climate solutions. And so this is what we really want to emphasize and ensure countries make sure women are sitting at the table.
Right. So how exactly you think the situation might be changed after COP29? Probably you can bring some examples from your practical experience of the situation in different parts of the world.
Yeah, I think that we need to continue to, one, show the data, because we're constantly asked for data on what the role is and why women are contributing to solutions. So we'll continue to do that, and I think that will have an impact. And at COP29, I think we've done a better job of doing that and communicating that to governments. But I'll just give one example. We have a project in the DR Congo where we are reforesting damaged lands. It's all women-led. We've been doing it for 10 years. It's all direct funding to the ground. This is another key component, is that we need to see that frontline communities, people who are working on the ground resolving issues, need direct funding. And we have been planting so many trees now that it's changing the entire biome in the Atombe region of the DR Congo, where the reforestation project is bringing back the natural forest itself, and 25% of the trees are for human use. And so it's stopping the communities from impacting the old growth forest. So while we're reforesting and caring for communities, we're protecting over 1.6 million acres of old growth forest, which is key to climate mitigation and adaptation. And so again, this is happening at a very close to the ground level, and this is where we see a lot of impact of the solutions women are bringing, and at the highest levels of government as well. We can't forget that the Paris Climate Agreement was because of a lot of powerful women, including Christiana Figueres, who pushed that through. But just to say that, my last point on this is that we need to kind of look at things in a different way about how gender and women are leading the way, in that many times we think of solutions in these very large corporate structures and how we can continue business as usual. And what a lot of women are saying is when you look at these quote unquote small solutions on the ground and you add them up, they actually equal these large solutions, and it puts communities in the front and not corporate structures that often cost so much money and actually are not as effective.
So you're working with the governments, with the non-governmental organizations, with individuals, with women-leading organizations, right?
Exactly.
It's a mutual approach to what has to be achieved.
It's a very comprehensive approach, yes.
Right. Climate financing, that's a key issue which is being discussed here at COP29 in Baku. Where do you think the countries may achieve the consensus on these particular issues? As, for example, the international organizations, what they can do is they can provide a platform for negotiations. And it comes more to the governmental program, to the private institutions, to the banks, which may support which may support the programs aimed to work with gender equality issues. So where you see the possibility and prospects in this particular direction?
Well, I think first of all, we need to look at the data that is showing the role that women are playing and that they need to be financed. I mean, right now, so many women are not at those decision-making tables and are not being considered for financing. And so we should be looking at, indigenous peoples, women-led organizations, and seeing that they're completely underfunded. And so this is a huge thing that governments can have an intervention in, is to ensure that the financing is going to the people who are actually providing the solutions. And I would say specifically women and also indigenous women who are protecting biodiversity, protecting forests. So I think this is a key component of where governments can move more. We also see that a lot of civil society organizations are here demanding more finance overall. And you'll be hearing in the hallways the chants of pay up global north, because we need to look at the fact that so many countries in the global south did not cause the worst of the climate crisis, have not been contributing to the climate crisis, and it is time to really take responsibility from have the governments and the communities that have created the crisis to pay what is owed to those that have not done the harm, where the transition needs to occur. Like, how do we actually pay for a transition to renewable energy? Well, those finances have to come from somewhere, and it should be from the people who caused the main harm. And so we need to have fairness. We need a fast, fair, funded phase out of fossil fuels, and this just transition that we're all talking about, that money has to come from the global north, not from the people who harmed things the least. And so this is a big part of the climate finance discussion that's going on here. And the last thing I'll say in that is it really needs to be done not in the forms of loans that cause more financial problems for the global south. It needs to be in the form of grants and philanthropy, and where we're not contributing more to the problem.
But we shouldn't forget about the division among the countries. It comes to the financial capacity, it comes to the geopolitics they have. It's about global north and global south, and especially after the elections in the United States, the situation is quite unstable and difficult to predict what will be the next state by the global powers. So how do you think the countries may overlap these difficulties to come to the sustainable future division possibilities?
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult. I will not shy from saying, as someone from the United States, the incredible political context that we're in is very, very, very difficult. And so we're going to have to see countries outside the United States step up, and they are doing that. I was just hearing about different countries that are fossil fuel producing countries today putting out a statement about their nationally determined contributions, their NDCs, and really committing to keeping the 1.5 degree guardrail in mind, and looking at how they're going to achieve their net zero goals. And so I think again, we have to think as a global community and how we're going to achieve these carbon emission reductions, but also looking at how we're going to stop pollution at the source. And one thing I wanted to share, in terms of what global communities can do and governments can do, is I'm very honored to sit on the steering committee of something called the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is a companion piece really to the Paris Climate Agreement, which is something that has been, something we've been advocating for over many years at the recent COPs, where countries can get together and really begin to find a mechanism in which they can phase out fossil fuels in an equitable way, create a just transition, and actually get at the source of the climate crisis, which is coal, oil, and gas. And we have to remember that this is the source of the problem, and how do we actually have a mechanism for countries to negotiate this phase out? And so, in response to your question, I would also say we need to look at complementary mechanisms at this point beyond the Paris Agreement or complementary to the Paris Agreement to actually move at the speed and scale that nature is demanding with the escalating climate crisis. So I would also add in that I think the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty is a key component of also how we can move forward.
And let me ask you my last question about your organization, WECAN. What will be the next step? What you're planning to work with more actively after COP29 is finished?
Yes, one thing that is very exciting for us about coming to the climate talks is a meeting with all of our partners and strategizing with women networks from around the world. And so, what we're doing is we're strengthening our work outside of these spaces as well as continuing to advocate here. It's so important we do the work here so that governments understand what our positions are, and we try to make the best of these negotiations. But a lot of our work also happens not in these spaces all year long, and we are going to continue to invest in community-led solutions, invest in women's leadership on the ground, invest in women's leadership in general at the highest levels of government and financial institutions, and ensure that women's voices are being heard, especially those from the front line. And we will continue to work as we go towards COP30, where we're very excited to be working with some incredible Indigenous women leaders. And maybe I will end on the note of something that they shared with me, because we work with them on protection of forests and the Amazon region and connected biomes, but also on protection of forests, but also reforestation. And they shared with me a saying that I really love, which is when you come to Berlin, when you come to COP30, it's not just about reforesting the land, it's about reforesting our minds.
Right.
We need to change how we're living with each other and the earth. We need to reforest our mind.
Point. You made in your first answer, you said about education, importance to spread the right information. Well, thank you so much for being with us. We wish you good luck in your work and hope to meet you again, probably in Brazil.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Just to remind you, watched Inside Politics. Stay with us and see you in the next edition.